My name is Colleen Whitaker. I'm 34 years old, and 9 days ago I stood inside a concrete storage unit off Highway 30 with a detective beside me staring at my daughter's names painted on the wall. The unit smelled like fresh latex paint and baby lotion. There was a double crib already assembled, a glider chair with a folded quilt over the arm, a dresser with the drawers organized by size, newborn clothes still wearing their tags, a little nightlight shaped like a moon, plugged into an orange extension cord that ran to a socket by the door. Somebody had painted a field of yellow stars across the back wall, and underneath the stars, in careful looping letters, 2 names, my girls' names, names I had spoken out loud to exactly one living person on this earth. On a folding table by the door sat a stack of my stolen mail, held together with a fat rubber band. The detective asked me if I recognized the handwriting on that wall. I did. That was the moment my knees finally gave out. But here's what none of them knew. Not the detective, not my husband holding my elbow, not the man from the storage office apologizing over and over like any of it was his fault. The woman who built that room had been rehearsing to replace me for 9 months. And how does a nursery end up in a rented unit on a highway? The answer starts at a baby shower in March, the day my sister picked up a cake knife. If you've ever been told to keep the peace while somebody else kept the spotlight, sit down, pour yourself something warm. This one is for you. Before any of this, I was nobody's main character. I'm a hospital pharmacist at St. Luke's in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. 11 years in that basement. Fluorescent lights, the hum of the refrigeration unit, the little whir of the automated dispensing cabinet that sounds like a robot clearing its throat. Pharmacists learn one habit early, and it keeps people alive. We verify. Drug, dose, route, time, patient. Then we do it again. Then we initial it. Nothing leaves my hands without a signature on it, because in my line of work, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. Remember that. It matters later. My husband Dale runs a 2-man gutter and roofing outfit out of a truck with a dented tailgate. He's the kind of man who climbs up on your grandmother's house in October to clear the leaves and then won't take her money, so she bakes him a pie he pretends to like. We met when he replaced the flashing on my rental duplex and stayed 40 minutes past quitting time explaining ice dams to a woman who had not asked. We bought a little gray house on Sycamore Court 6 years ago. Nothing fancy. Dale built the porch railing himself out of stubbornness and a YouTube video. I'm telling you all this so you understand what I had and what my sister decided I had taken from her. Because I earned my life one shift at a time. Community college first, then the state school, then loans that followed me around like a stray dog until I was 30. I drove a Corolla with a coat hanger for an antenna until the year I got married. Nobody handed me a thing. That detail matters, because for 34 years my family told a very different story about me, that things came easy for Colleen, that Colleen was the steady one, that Colleen didn't need help the way other people did. It sounds like a compliment. Hold it up to the light, and it's a job description. In my mother's house, there was only ever one patient, and it was never me. My sister's name is Vivian, 3 years older. By the time I was 9, I already understood the arithmetic of our home, whatever day it was on the calendar. It was Vivian's day. My 10th birthday party got called off 40 minutes before it started because Vivian folded up on the kitchen linoleum with a stomach pain that had her crying so hard the neighbors came out. Mom drove her to the emergency room. Dad stood in the driveway making phone calls to other people's parents in his good shirt. The doctors found nothing at all. By 7 that evening, my sister was sitting cross-legged in front of the television, eating my sheet cake with her fingers, right as rain. And my mother smoothed my hair back and said, "She needs us more than you do, Collie." I thought that sentence was love. It took me 25 years to hear what it actually was. It happened at my band concert, at my high school graduation, where she fainted during the F's, and my whole family missed my name. At my wedding rehearsal, where a migraine sent her home before we ever got to the toasts. A crisis timed like a bus schedule. Vivian was never scolded and never wrong. She was sensitive. She was delicate. She was going through something. My mother, Marguerite, ran our family like a stage manager with exactly one star, and the star could not tolerate anyone else near the lights. One more thing about my sister, and I need you to hold on to it because it comes back around in a way that still makes my arms go cold. Vivian could not stand to be touched. Never could. No hugs, no arm through the elbow, no hand on the shoulder. The family joke was that you greeted Vivian like you'd greet a cat. You stood still and let her come to you. At her own wedding, she and Curtis did a stiff little sway at arm's length while everybody clapped and pretended that was normal. So no, not one person at that baby shower thought twice about the fact that in 5 months, nobody had ever once put a hand on her belly. You didn't touch Vivian. You admired her from a respectful distance, like a painting behind velvet rope, which is exactly how my mother raised her. I'm not telling you this so you'll despise a little girl with a stomachache. I'm telling you because 30 years of it raises a question nobody in my family ever had the nerve to ask out loud. What happens to the star when somebody else has news? We found out 7 years ago when my father had a stroke in the garage with the shop vac still running. He was 61. Walter Prentice was a quiet man who fixed what was broken and asked for nothing, and I have spent most of my adult life trying to be him. At the funeral, Vivian wailed so violently that 2 men from the church had to walk her out, and my mother went with her, and neither of them came back, not to the burial, not to the lunch in the fellowship hall. I stayed. I shook every single hand in that receiving line by myself. I was 27 years old. Afterward, my sister disappeared for 2 months. Grieving in her own way, Mom said. While I canceled my father's magazine subscriptions, filed the life insurance, sold his truck to a man from Marion, and sat with my mother every Sunday while she cried into the good tablecloth. One of those Sundays she took my hand across that table and said, "You're the strong one, Colleen. I don't know what I'd do without you." I carried that sentence around like a medal for 6 years before I understood it was a harness. The strong one doesn't get asked how she's holding up. The strong one gets handed the paperwork. And I have to be honest with you, because this part is mine to own. I liked being needed. After Dad died, holding my mother upright became my second job, and I clocked in every single week without fail. That's my flaw. It was never that I trusted my sister. I never trusted Vivian an inch, not since I was 9 years old on the kitchen floor of my own birthday. It's that I believed my mother was mine to manage, mine to protect, mine to keep from cracking. It never once occurred to me to ask what my mother was doing with all that access to me. It should have, because one evening in July, at that very table, under that very tablecloth, I handed her the one secret I could not afford to lose. Dale and I started trying for a baby. The spring I turned 31. Nothing happened. A year of nothing, then tests, then words like unexplained and diminished, which are medical words for we don't know and we're sorry. We did 2 rounds of treatment we paid for out of the money we'd set aside to redo the kitchen. Both failed. I work in medicine. I know the percentages. Knowing the percentages does not help you in the shower at 2 in the morning, and it does not help you in the card aisle at Hy-Vee the first week of May. We kept it completely private. 2 full years, except once. One evening in July, at my mother's kitchen table, she caught me crying over a commercial for baby wipes, and I broke open. I told her everything. The tests, the 2 failed rounds, the money, the way I'd started avoiding one particular aisle in one particular store. She held my hand and swore on my father's memory that it would stay between the 2 of us. One person. In the whole world, I told one person, one time. Dale never even told his own brother. We weren't ashamed. We were protecting something soft, the way you shield a match from the wind. And I'll say this plainly because women our age don't say it enough. Infertility is not a character flaw, and it is not a contest entry. It's a grief that lives in your calendar. Every single month has a due date in it that never existed. You learn to smile at other people's announcements with your back teeth pressed together, and you get good at it, and you hate that you're good at it. By that July, I was very good at it. So when August came and my phone lit up with a group text from my mother, all capital letters, a row of pink and blue hearts, family dinner Sunday. Vivian has news. I set the phone face down on the counter. I finished drying the dishes. I practiced my smile in the dark kitchen window over the sink. I already knew what the news was. It was always going to be her news first. Vivian announced her pregnancy that Sunday in August the way other people launch a product. She stood at the head of my mother's table, tapped her glass with a spoon, and unveiled a framed ultrasound photo like it was one of those oversized lottery checks. 11 weeks along. Due in March. And here's the truth. The whole truth. I was happy for her. Genuinely. Whatever 30 years of ruined birthdays had done to us, a baby is a baby. And I stood there watching my sister glow, and I thought, maybe this softens her, maybe this is the thing that fixes it. My mother cried and started a group chat that same night called Baby Countdown, and for the next 2 months, that was the only channel our family broadcast on. Vivian quit her job at the paint store to focus on the pregnancy. Mom drove her to appointments, or said she did. Every craving got a photograph. Every twin got 3 paragraphs. I hit the little thumbs up on all of it from the pharmacy at midnight, and I never once complained, and I want that on the record. The only person in that family who didn't glow was Curtis. My brother-in-law is a big, soft-spoken guy who does vac installs and laughs at his own jokes a beat before the punchline. That fall, his laugh went missing. He'd sit at Sunday dinner with gray half-moons under his eyes, cutting his food into smaller and smaller pieces, smiling half a second too late every time, like a bad phone connection. When I asked him in October if he was sleeping, he said, "Work was crazy." Nobody's vac business is crazy in October in Iowa. I noticed it the way you notice a car parked wrong on your street. You clock it, you move on. Keep your eye on Curtis. Out of every single person at that table passing the rolls and toasting the future, he was the only one who wasn't acting. In late November, Baby Countdown went quiet, not silent, curated. The daily photos stopped, and in their place came short updates typed by my mother. Vivian is resting. Doctor wants her taking it easy. Please respect her privacy. She's limiting visitors. She skipped Thanksgiving entirely. Mom carried a plate over to the duplex and reported back that she was doing beautifully, just tired. And something else changed that nobody said out loud. My sister, who had never in her life been a hugger, stopped letting anyone within 3 feet of her at all. She came to one lunch in early December, wrapped in a big oatmeal-colored cardigan, sat at the far end of the table, and left before the pie. I didn't connect a single thing. Why would I? I had a lifelong policy of not looking directly at Vivian, the way you don't stare at the sun. Besides, that same week my own world tilted. I came off a Saturday shift in the middle of December, and out of pure stubborn habit took a test from the box under the sink. The value pack of disappointment, Dale called it, because gallows humor is free. I set it on the edge of the tub and started brushing my teeth. Then I stopped brushing my teeth. 2 lines, after 2 years. 2 clean, undeniable pink lines. I walked into the kitchen holding that stick like a baby bird, and Dale took one look at my face and sat straight down on the floor next to the dishwasher. And we stayed down there on the cold tile laughing and crying until his coffee went cold on the counter above us. We decided before we even got up, we tell nobody until the first trimester is behind us. 2 years of heartbreak buys you that caution. Nobody meant nobody. The ultrasound in late January is the best memory I own. The tech went quiet, tilted her head, turned the screen toward us. 2 flickers. 2 heartbeats. Twins? Dale made a sound I have never heard from a grown man before or since, something between a hiccup and a hallelujah. Girls, we learn a few weeks later. 2 girls. I floated through my shifts for a week. And then I made the phone call I would give anything on this earth to take back. Understand my wiring, if not my thinking. My mother was 63, widowed, and I had been her load-bearing wall for 7 years. Vivian's shower was 4 weeks out. And I knew, the way you know your own family's weather, that if my mother found out later that I'd hidden this from her for months, I would be paying for it at every holiday until one of us was in the ground. So I called her on a Thursday night in February. I told her about the twins. I told her the names we had fallen in love with, Junie and Nell, because she asked, and because saying them out loud to my mother felt like introducing her to her granddaughters. And then I said it clearly, twice. Mom, this day's with you. Not a word to a living soul until after Vivian's shower. Her day comes first. I mean it. She went quiet for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is nothing. 3 seconds is also a very long time when you know somebody's rhythms. And when my mother's congratulations arrived, they arrived a half-beat late, just like Curtis's smile. Of course, sweetheart, she said. Of course, that's Vivian's day. I hung up feeling lighter. I had done the responsible thing, the considerate thing, the strong one thing. I had managed everybody's feelings and protected everybody's day. Somewhere across town, I now know, my mother sat in a dark kitchen with that phone in her lap, holding my secret in one hand and a much heavier one in the other. The shower was the second Saturday of March at my mother's house. 31 guests. Pink and gold balloons taped to the mantel. A 2-tier cake from the Good Bakery on First Avenue with a white ribbon tied around the knife handle. A banner over the fireplace that said, "Welcome, little one." Vivian held court in a white armchair like a queen at 34 weeks, opening gifts in that big oatmeal cardigan she'd been living in since November. I sat off to the side, keeping my own 14-week secret tucked under a loose blouse. With twins you show early, and I was already careful how I stood. I fetched punch. I wrote down who gave what, because of course that job was mine. It was by every measure entirely her day, and I was fine with that. I had been fine with that my entire life. Then came the toast. My mother stood up and raised her glass and got through 2 lovely sentences about miracles and new chapters. And then her eyes swept past Vivian and landed on me, and I watched it happen in slow motion, the words leaving her mouth before anything in this world could stop them. And soon this family will have even more blessings because Colleen is carrying twins. The room did that thing where every conversation dies at the same instant. 31 faces swung toward me. Somebody's aunt actually clapped twice before she read the temperature of the room. And Vivian rose out of that white armchair without a word. She walked to the cake table. She picked up the knife. She turned around holding it, and she pointed it at my stomach, at my hands, which had flown there on instinct, and she screamed. This is my day. The scream didn't frighten me half as much as what came after it. I put my palms out and I said, "Viv, put it down, please." And my sister leaned in close, and her voice dropped to almost nothing, and she said, "You stole my life and my babies." Babies. I remember that word snagging on something in the back of my mind even then, like a sweater catching on a nail. My Aunt Bernadette got an arm around Vivian's shoulders and steered her backward, and the knife clattered down into the cake, ruining the bottom tier. My mother stood frozen with her glass still raised while her church friends studied the bottoms of their punch cup. I did not scream back. I kept my face perfectly still. I collected my coat and my husband, and I walked out of my mother's house through a silence you could have cut with that same knife. In the truck, Dale sat with both hands on the wheel and didn't start the engine. "Colleen," he said slowly, "did you hear what she said? Babies, plural. We have not told one single soul on this planet that there are 2. Neither of us said another word the whole way home. There was nothing safe to say. Let me stop here, because I can feel some of you not believing me. A knife at a baby shower sounds like a soap opera. I was standing 3 feet from it, and I barely believed it. But the knife was never the scary part. The scary part was finding out how long she had been sharpening it. Now, you might reasonably expect that pointing a blade at your pregnant sister in front of 31 witnesses would earn a person some consequences. You do not know my family. My phone rang at 7 the next morning, and it was my mother, and I made the mistake of hoping. I actually thought she was calling to ask if I was all right. She was not. "Your sister is in a fragile place right now," Mom said, in the same calm managerial voice she'd used on me my entire life. "That announcement was poorly timed, Colleen. You have to see that." I reminded her that the announcement had been hers. Pause. "Well, it was going to come out eventually. The point is, Vivian feels blindsided, and I need you not to make this bigger than it is." Bigger than it is. A knife pointed at my abdomen at her party, and my assignment, mine, was containment. I stood at my kitchen counter listening to my mother negotiate on behalf of the woman who had just threatened her unborn grandchildren, and something inside me went very still and very clear, like the moment a fever break. "Mom," I said. She pointed a knife at my stomach. And my mother said the sentence I will remember until the day I die. It was a cake knife, Colleen. It was her day. There it was. The house rule, spoken plainly at last over a phone line to the strong one. I said I had to get ready for work. I didn't have work. I sat down at the kitchen table where Dale had left his coffee mug, and I did the only thing 11 years in a pharmacy had drilled into my hands for a situation where everything is going wrong at once. I took out a notebook. I wrote the date at the top of the page, and I started documenting. March 14, shower, knife, exact words. Witnesses present, listed. March 15, 7:02 a.m. phone call. Exact word. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. Fine. From that morning forward, everything was going to be documented. Aunt Bernadette called me that Wednesday. Bern is my mother's younger sister, a retired school bus driver with a lie detector where most people keep their manners. She'd been the one who walked Vivian off me at the shower. She got about 2 sentences of small talk in and gave up. Colleen, honey, I need to tell you something, and I need you sitting down for it. That mess Saturday, she said, wasn't out of nowhere. Since the first week of February, weeks before the shower, Vivian had been working the family phone tree, calling cousins, calling my mother's church friends, telling anybody who would listen that I had been faking fertility problems for sympathy. But the moment her pregnancy finally got the family's attention, I had suddenly, conveniently, turned up pregnant myself, with twins no less, because Colleen always has to win. She told me you'd been jealous of her since you were children, Bern said. She had it all organized, hon, like a little speech she practiced. And then Bern said the thing that made the room go sideways. She was telling people about your twins before your mother ever raised that glass. I thanked her, I wrote it all down, and then I sat in my quiet kitchen and let the 2 impossible pieces knock against each other. My fertility struggles, told to one person, one time, in July. My twins, told to one person, one time, in February. Vivian had both, and she'd had them early enough to build an entire smear campaign out of them before the cake was even delivered. The knife hadn't been a snap. The knife had been opening night, which left a question I could barely stand to hold in my hands. There were only 2 people in that kitchen in July, and one of them was me. I looked at that sentence in my notebook for a long, long time. Then I wrote underneath it, in small letters, the most generous theory available to me. Mom let it slip. Mothers let things slip. I underlined it twice, as if underlining could make it true. The Facebook post went up 9 days after the shower. A photograph of my sister, mascara artfully wrecked, one hand resting on the oatmeal cardigan, and 3 paragraphs I could recite to you today from memory. She wrote that her baby shower had been hijacked and destroyed by a family member who could not stand to let her have one single day. She wrote that she had been verbally attacked while heavily pregnant and had to be physically protected by relatives. She never used my name once. She didn't have to. 240 comments bloomed under that post like mold on bread. Prayer hands, broken hearts. Some people need attention like other people need oxygen. Stay strong, Mama. My cousin Shelby, who I personally taught to parallel park, left a frowning face. By that weekend 2 of my great-aunts had unfriended me, and a woman from my mother's congregation stopped me by the eggs at the grocery store, looked down at my rounding belly, and just shook her head slowly like I was a wreck on the interstate she was driving past. I'll tell you the truth about what that does to a person, because the truth is embarrassing. At midnight, pregnant and furious, I sat on my couch and typed a reply. 4 paragraphs, the dates, the witnesses, the knife. My thumb was hovering over the post button when my phone buzzed with a text from the pharmacy asking if I could cover Sunday, and I looked at my own words glowing in that dark living room, and I heard myself think, clear as a church bell, if you post this, you're a contestant. The only prize in her game is attention, and the only way to win is to refuse to play on her stage. I deleted the reply. Instead, I opened a folder on my laptop, labeled it with the date, and screenshotted every single thing, her posts, every comment, the unfriendings, all of it. Evidence doesn't shout. Evidence doesn't need likes. Vivian was building an audience. Fine, I would build a record. April brought a strange season of small, deniable cruelty. A flower delivery to my front door, white lilies, the funeral kind, with a card that read in loving memory and no name. A cash-on-delivery order of newborn diapers I never placed. That was the first of 5 deliveries, each one requiring me to stand on my porch and explain to a confused driver that no, Mom, I didn't order anything. Then the calls started at the hospital. The unit clerk flagged me down one afternoon. A woman had phoned twice asking which shifts the pharmacist Whitaker worked, claiming to be a family friend planning a surprise. We don't give that out, obviously. She'd hung up both times. I logged every incident, date, time, what happened, who witnessed it. And somewhere in the 3rd week, reading it back on my lunch break, the pattern stood up and looked me right in the face. The lilies arrived the day of my 16-week appointment. The first diaper stunt landed on the day of my blood draw. The hospital calls came the same afternoon my OBS office called to reschedule my 20-week scan. Every strike landed on a day that meant something in my pregnancy. Days that existed nowhere on this earth except my own calendar and my own medical chart. I sat in that break room with a cold cup of coffee and wrote one sentence and boxed it in ink. It's like she has my calendar. Dale wanted to drive over to the duplex and have it out. I talked him down, and I'll tell you exactly why. Confrontation was the invitation she was engraving. Every stunt was a doorbell she was ringing, waiting for me to answer it angry, in public where somebody could film it. So the story she'd been selling since February could finally come true. I would not answer. But I did start asking a colder question in the margins of my notes. Not why is she doing it? How does she know? I got my answer to neither question on the last Friday in April, in the waiting room of the women's clinic, at my rescheduled 20-week scan. I checked in. I sat down. I reached for a magazine. And there she was, Vivian, sitting directly across the waiting room in the oatmeal cardigan, hands folded on the swell of her belly, watching me with a small patient smile like she'd been saving my seat. My appointment time existed in 3 places on this earth. My phone, Dale's phone, and my chart. Small world, she said, loud enough for the room. I did not perform. Every pregnant woman in that waiting room was watching, and some animal part of my brain understood that the audience was the entire point, that somewhere in her story that night I would be the unstable one who made a scene at a doctor's office. So I walked up to the front desk instead and quietly asked 3 questions, professional to professional. Has anyone called about my appointments? Can you put a privacy flag on my chart? Can you check whether anyone besides me has logged into my patient portal? The receptionist typed, frowned, typed again. No calls logged, flags on now, and nobody but you has ever logged into your account. That night I changed every password I owned anyway, turned on every alert, wrote the whole scene down while Dale read over my shoulder with his jaw working. Here's what I need you to understand, because it matters more than anything else I'm going to tell you. I did not shrug this off. I saw the red flag. I acted on the red flag that same day in every way a careful person knows how. And the system itself looked me in the eye and told me I was secure. When they finally found the leak, months later, it turned out to be somewhere no password change on earth could reach. A door I had left open 6 years earlier, and had every reason to believe was long since closed. We'll get there. Vivian never had an appointment that day. The desk confirmed it later. She had simply known where I would be. The first week of May, my sister asked to meet. Neutral ground, she said. A coffee place downtown. Just us girls to clear the air. I went, against Dale's advice, for exactly one reason. My notebook had a blank column labeled her side, and I am the kind of woman who fills in columns. For 10 minutes I watched a performance worth the price of admission, tears at all the right moments, a trembling hand on the belly. The hormones had me all turned around, Collie. You know I'd never actually hurt you. She dabbed her eyes with a napkin, and I watched her check, over the rim of that napkin, whether the couple at the next table was watching. Then came the pivot, smooth as a key change. But you have to understand how it looked, announcing twins at my shower. You've been second your whole life, and I get that this was your moment, but it was supposed to be my day. My day. Always the same words, worn smooth as river stones, and then the ask, the actual reason for the coffee and the tears. So I think, for the family, you should post something. Just clearing up that it was a misunderstanding and you're sorry for how it unfolded. Mom agrees. It would mean so much to her. There it was. A public confession, drafted by the offender, co-signed by my mother, to be published under my name. I looked at my sister for a long moment and I said, "No, Viv, I'm not going to do that." And I watched the tears shut off. Not fade, shut off like a faucet, mid-drop. What was left looking back at me across that little table was flat and cold and older than both of us. I stood up, put money down for both drinks, and walked out. It was the faucet I kept thinking about on the drive home. You cannot fake plumbing like that. The crying was the mask. The dry eyes were my sister. Vivian's due date was the end of March. It had come and gone with no announcement. and I'll admit the quiet felt strange, but a hospital in spring eats your attention, and I let it. Then the second week of May, my mother summoned the family to what she called a healing dinner, and before anybody lifted a fork, she stood up, gripped the back of her chair, and announced through tears that Vivian had lost the baby. Stillborn, she said, 36 weeks. It had happened privately, with dignity, and Vivian needed love now, not questions. The table made the sound a family makes when the floor gives out. My great-aunt wept into her napkin. Shelby ran to the bathroom, and I sat there with both hands over the twins and grieved for my sister, honestly, physically. Because whatever she had pointed at me in March, I would not have wished that on her in 1,000 years. I reached for my phone to text Curtis, my heart, my help, anything at all. And that's when the details started refusing to line up. No hospital was ever named, and I know every labor and delivery floor within 60 miles of here by name and by phone extension. No funeral, no graveside, no date. Vivian doesn't want a service, it would break her. Curtis never answered my message, or anyone's. He had gone to his brother's to grieve like men do, I was told later, a sentence that belongs in a museum of things that mean the exact opposite of what they say. And no questions meant no questions. When Shelby gently asked what the baby's name had been, my mother just looked at her. Just looked, and Shelby apologized. I drove home that night with my grief slowly curdling into something I couldn't name and didn't want to. In my notebook I wrote the facts. Then I sat there with the pen hovering. Then I added, no hospital, no name, no Curtis. And I closed the book. Some doors you're not ready to open, even when your own hand wrote the address on them. Grief rearranged the family board overnight, and every single piece moved toward me. The shower was forgotten. The knife was forgotten. A news story settled over us like snow. Vivian had lost everything, Colleen had everything, and decent people balanced their accounts. My mother said it out loud at Sunday dinner in June, spooning green beans onto my plate like a down payment. Your babies are all she has left now, Colleen. Let her be part of this pregnancy. It would heal her. Within a week, the requests started arriving. Every one of them relayed through my mother, everyone bigger than the last. Vivian wants to come to the anatomy scan. Vivian should be in the delivery room. She's a mother, too, in her heart. Vivian would love to be godmother. And then, on a Tuesday phone call, the one that made my ears ring, Vivian has some beautiful thoughts on names. There's room for compromise there, honey. You're having two. Room for compromise on my daughter's names. Dale, who had spent 3 months being talked down by me, finally boiled over at that dinner table, stood up, said the first hard sentence he had ever said to my mother in 10 years. Something plain and true about knives and about apologies nobody had ever made, and walked out to the truck. Me, I did it quieter. Quiet is my first language. I looked at my mother and I said, no, Mom, to all of it. No. One little word, and you'd have thought I fired a shotgun in church. She actually stepped back from the table. I had never said it to her before. Not once in 34 years. It felt like the first word of a language I should have learned as a girl. 2 days later, my mother mentioned breezily, in the middle of a phone call, that she'd heard my 26-week appointment had gone beautifully. I had not told her about that appointment. I had not told anyone. In early July, my mother asked me to sort my father's old things for the church rummage sale. It was a chore she'd been assigning me for 7 years, and one I had never minded, because an hour alone with my dad's flannel shirts is its own kind of chapel. The boxes lived in the closet of the spare room, Dad's things on the bottom shelf, Mom's keepsakes above, photo albums, ribbons, and the old butter cookie tin where she'd saved every card anybody ever mailed her. I wasn't snooping. The tin was wedged against the box I needed, and when I pulled, the lid popped and a lifetime of birthday cards fanned out across the carpet. I knelt there gathering them up, half smiling at the ancient ones, and then I stopped. Between a get-well card and a church bulletin lay a folded sheet of printer paper. Through the fold, I could see the gray cone of an ultrasound image. I opened it. It was mine. My 20-week anatomy scan, the one from that last Friday in April, the clinic's header across the top, my patient ID number in the corner, both babies mid-wiggle, printout of a screen I had only ever seen inside my own portal account. And down the margin, beside each little gray profile, Somebody had written my daughter's names, Junie, Nell, and Zeiss, in handwriting I have known since I was 4 years old, looping, pretty, unmistakably my sister's, each name underlined twice. I don't know how long I knelt on that carpet, long enough to hear my mother humming along to the radio in her kitchen, 1 floor of carpet and drywall away, close enough to call out to. I had told those names to 1 person on this earth, and the 2 facts stood in that room with me, holding hands. The leak came through my mother's house, and whatever was flowing through that pipe was ending up annotated, underlined, and filed in my sister's handwriting. I did not walk into that kitchen. I folded the printout into my purse with hands that had gone completely steady, because that's what they do, finished boxing my father's shirts, kissed my mother's cheek at the door, and drove home with the radio off, listening to my own pulse the whole way. That was where I stopped being a daughter with hurt feelings and started being a professional with a problem. Monday morning, I took my notebooks, my screenshot folder, and that folded ultrasound to an attorney named Harriet Vance. Gray Bob, reading glasses on a beaded chain, a handshake like a nutcracker, $2,500 retainer, and worth every cent for what she said in the first 10 minutes. Stop trying to figure out why. Crazy is not your case. Pattern is your case. Document everything. Say nothing to anyone. Let her keep talking. Then she tapped the ultrasound with 1 finger. And this, we do not confront this yet. If your mother is the channel, then the channel is an asset, and the channel can be tested. So we tested it. That Sunday at dinner, calm as you please, I served my mother a lie along with the pot roast. I told her just her, door closed, voice low, mother to daughter, that with twins, my doctors wanted me delivering at Mercy Medical across town instead of St. Luke's where I worked. Every word of it false. My delivery had always been planned for St. Luke's, and exactly 3 living souls knew it. Me, Dale, and Harriet Vance's legal pad. My mother received that false secret with a squeeze of my hand and a promise, God love her, that it would stay between us. A canary in a coal mine doesn't have to do anything, Harriet explained. It only has to sing where 1 tunnel can hear it. If Mercy Medical ever came back to me in a comment, a call, a stunt, I would have proof of the entire pipeline, mother to sister, no password required. I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't felt since March, and it took me 8 miles to name it. It wasn't safety, it was initiative. For 4 months, the game had been played on me. Starting that Sunday, I was dealing. 2 weeks later, in the middle of July, my neighbor Mrs. Ostrander flagged me down at the mailbox. She's 78, sleeps like a cat, and misses nothing on Sycamore Court. Sweetheart, she said, does your sister visit at night? I felt my face do something careful. She described it. Around 2 in the morning, twice that week, a car parked down past the Kirkwoods, and a woman walking back up the sidewalk to stand at the side of our house. The north side, where the spare bedroom is. The room with the crib boxes stacked up, visible through the window. Just standing there. The second night, Mrs. Ostrander swore. The woman raised a phone and took pictures of the window, of the dark window of my daughter's Sunday room. The next morning I found soft dents in the flower bed under that window, the tidy oval prints of a woman's flat shoes. I photographed them next to a tape measure, like I was working a scene, 'cause by then I suppose I was. I didn't call my mother, I didn't post about it. I called a company a coworker recommended, and by Friday we had a doorbell camera, 2 motion floodlights, and a camera over the garage covering the north side of the house. Dale walked the yard every night that whole summer, coffee in hand, casual as a man, checking his tomatoes, about as casual as a lighthouse. And still, the mail started going missing. Small things at first, the kind you blame on the post office. A bank statement that never came. A birthday card from Aunt Byrne with a $20 bill in it that she swore up and down she'd sent. Then the clinic's appointment reminder card, 2 months running. I filed a hold at the post office and noted every gap in the notebook, which by then had become 2 notebooks. You can call all of that paranoid. In July, you'd have been right to wonder. By November, a detective was photographing that same rubber-banded stack of mail on a folding table off Highway 30. The text came on a Thursday night at the end of July from a number that hadn't lit up my phone since May. Curtis, can we talk? Not on the phone. Please don't tell Vive or your mom. Please. I stared at it a long time. Dale read it over my shoulder and said, "Trap?" which tells you exactly where my family stood by that summer. But I kept thinking about the man, with the missing laugh, cutting his food smaller and smaller all fall. The only person at that table who wasn't acting. Some people go quiet because they're guilty. Some go quiet because they're carrying something. I texted back, "A diner out on the highway, Saturday, 10 a.m. He was there when I arrived, early, which Curtis never is. Folded into the last booth with his back to the wall. 2 coffees already going cold in front of him, and a manila folder squared up on the table like a man about to confess to a crime that wasn't his. He looked thinner. He looked like his own company headshot left out in the rain. When I slid into the booth, he tried to say hello and got about half of it out. Then he put his hand flat on that folder and said, "Colleen, before I open this, I need you to know I wanted to tell you in May. I wanted to tell everybody I was outvoted. Outvoted in a family. Think about what that word means and about who gets votes." I looked at the folder under his big, freckled hand, and I understood with total clarity that whatever was inside it was going to break the story of my family in half, that for the rest of my life there would be before this booth and after this booth. I reached for it anyway. Inside was a hospital discharge summary, dated the 18th of November, an emergency department 1 county over. Patient, Vivian Reyes. And on the second line, in the flat language medicine uses when it can't afford feelings, were the words that rewrote my entire year. Fetal demise, 19 weeks. November, 19 weeks. I did the arithmetic the way I check a dose, twice, hoping to be wrong. The baby my family toasted in March had been gone since the 18th of November. The belly under that oatmeal cardigan was padding. The shower. The balloons, the 2-tier cake, the white ribbon on the knife handle. All of it had been a party for a child who no longer existed, thrown by the one other woman in that room who knew. Because she knew. Curtis's voice came out sanded flat. "It was your mother who met us at the Air that night. Marguerite sat in that hallway while they told Vive. And in the parking lot at 2 a.m, it was your mother who took her daughter's face in both hands and made the plan. We don't tell people yet. You'll announce when you're ready. Let Mom handle the family." Then the shower invitations went out in February, he said, and I kept thinking, she'll cancel it. She has to cancel it. And your mom kept saying, "Let her have this. It's part of her healing." He had begged them both to get Vivian to a doctor of the other kind. My mother's answer never changed, not once in 6 months. Therapy is for strangers. Family heals family. And there was more, the reason he couldn't sit inside it anymore. It hadn't been the first. There had been 4 others, over 7 years, all ended early, all hidden, a private ladder of grief my sister had been climbing alone, in silence, while her family admired her from the required distance. Everyone at that shower was toasting a baby who had been gone since November, and the only 2 women in the room who knew were standing behind the cake. I thought about the knife pointed at my stomach and the sentence underneath it. "You stole my life and my baby's, and it changed in my hands like a photograph coming up in the developer." She hadn't been announcing hatred. She had been announcing a delusion. One my mother had catered, decorated, and mailed invitations for. Curtis's phone buzzed on the table between us. Vive, flashing on the screen. He went gray and turned it face down, and neither of us breathed for a second. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where some of you will say, "She was sick, Colleen, have mercy." And I did. I sat in my car in that diner parking lot and cried for my sister, for 19 weeks, for 5 hidden losses, for the girl who was raised as an exhibit and never taught how to be a person. Mercy was never the question. The question was what mercy is allowed to cost, and who my family had decided would pay it. Because pity does not make a person safe to be near. Sometimes it makes them less safe. And everyone who claimed to love her had voted to leave her untreated and aim her at me. I got my answer about cost that same weekend. Sunday night, 1:40 in the morning. The floodlight tripped. The camera caught it clean. A figure at our back gate working the latch. The gate code that 4 people on this earth knew, because my mother kept our spare key and our codes on a cup hook in her pantry, labeled because of course she did. The latch scraped. The light hit. and the figure walked away fast down the fence line, unhurried and wrong, hugging a canvas tote, chin tucked down. You couldn't see the face. I didn't need the face. Monday morning, Harriet Vance watched that clip twice without blinking, and then opened her calendar. "We're done collecting," she said. "Now we file." A temporary order of protection was granted by a Lynn County judge that Thursday, on the strength of 2 notebooks, a folder of screenshots, 1 florist's card, 1 photograph of the footprint, and 11 seconds of video. Temporary, Harriet warned me. The real test was the final hearing. Both sides present, evidence on the record, set for September, then bumped again by the court's calendar to November 14th. The system is slow. She was not. From that Thursday on, my life became a countdown with a date at the bottom of it. And so does this story. November 14th. Hold on to it. The sheriff served Vivian on a Friday. My phone detonated by supper time. My mother's opening line, "No, hello, nothing." "A restraining order? Against your sister? Have you lost your mind?" I sat at my kitchen table, 8 months pregnant, and let her go. The fragility, the grief, family handles family, the entire hymnal. And while she preached, I did something new. I said almost nothing back. Not out of fear. Strategy. Harriet's voice in my head. Let them talk. Everything they say is inventory. And my mother monologuing to a silent daughter was inventory in a floral blouse. "You know she'd never actually hurt you. This is about attention, Colleen. It was always supposed to be her." And she caught herself and pivoted smoothly to how a court order would look to her congregation. What my mother did not know, monologuing to me about attention, was that a copy of that discharge summary was sitting in my lawyer's safe. She lectured me about Vivian's healing without knowing that I knew exactly what there was to heal from. Every righteous sentence she delivered was testimony against herself, given free of charge to the quietest audience of her life. I just said, "Okay, Mom," and "I have to go, Mom." And I wrote it all down when she hung up. The family sorted itself that weekend like laundry. 2 great aunts and Cousin Shelby went cold. But Aunt Byrne called, and her voice had gravel in it. I was standing 3 feet away at that shower. I know what I saw, and I know what I heard, and if a judge wants to hear it too, you give them my number. First witness. Volunteering. And then she added, almost casually, the thing that told me the tide was turning under my family's feet. "And, Colleen, I've been thinking, nobody ever did see Vivian's belly, did they? Not once. Just the sweater." Even the choir was starting to count. The order required my sister to stay 500 feet from me, my home, and my workplace. 11 days after she was served, I opened my front door at 6 in the morning to leave for a shift and nearly stepped on a white box. No postage, no note, ribbon tied in a careful bow. Inside, folded in tissue paper like something precious, were 2 newborn bodysuits, soft butter yellow, and across each tiny chest, embroidered by hand in rose-colored thread, a name. Junie on one, Nell on the other. Names we had told one person. Names that existed on a stolen printout in my sister's handwriting. Now stitched, needle and floss. Hours of work under a good lamp, onto clothing for my children, left on my doorstep by a woman legally barred from standing on it. I want you to sit with the hours. Rage is fast. A Facebook post takes a minute. Even the knife took only 1 second of madness. Embroidery is slow. Embroidery is patient. Somewhere across town, my sister had spent whole quiet evenings pulling my daughter's names to fabric. Letter by letter, loop by loop, planning. What is a gift like that? It isn't a gift. It's a claim. I stood on my porch in the July morning light with that box in my hands, and for the first time since March I was purely physically afraid. And then I did what I had trained myself to do instead of feeling things at 6 in the morning. I photographed the box exactly where it lay. I bagged it, tissue and all, in a 2-gallon freezer bag from my own kitchen. I called the non-emergency line, met an officer on my lunch break, and filed report number 1 for violation of an order of protection. The officer, a young guy with kind eyes, held the bag up and studied the stitching. "This is handmade," he said. "Somebody took real time with this." "I know," I said. "That's why I called you." With a violation report filed and a hearing on the docket, Harriet finally had the leverage she'd been building toward all spring. A subpoena for the health network's actual access records, not the front desk view. The audit logs, the ones nobody at a reception counter can see. It took their legal department 3 weeks to comply. On a Tuesday in early August, Harriet called me into her office, laid a printout on the desk, and turned it around to face me the way you turn a verdict. "That receptionist told you the truth," she said. "Nobody but you ever accessed your account. She just wasn't looking at the right account." 6 years earlier, after my gallbladder surgery, I had signed a form giving my mother proxy access to my patient portal. 1 signature, 1 recovery, 1 ride to a follow-up appointment while I was still loopy from anesthesia. Forgotten by that Christmas. The little clinic I'd used back then had since been absorbed into the same health network as my OB. Proxy came along with it, dormant in my settings. Alive and there. Marguerite Prentice, authorized representative. 29 logins in 8 months. Harriet had matched them against my notebooks, line by line. A login the morning of the funeral lilies. A login the day before the waiting room ambush. 20 minutes after the clinic confirmed my rescheduled scan. A login the evening before the hospital started getting calls about my shift schedule. My mother had not let something slip at a kitchen table. My mother had been running surveillance on her pregnant daughter and delivering the take to the woman who had pointed the knife. 29 times, methodically, for 8 months. And the canary? The canary saying that same week. A cousin's Facebook thread about hospital billing, and there was Vivian commenting from her own account about certain people who think they're too good for St. Luke's and have to go deliver at Mercy. Mercy. The false detail. The one I had spoken out loud to exactly one person, one time, over pot roast, with the door closed. The pipeline, complete and documented. My chart to my mother's eyes. My mother's mouth to my sister's hands. My sister's hands to my doorstep. Harriet clicked her pen and said the only celebratory thing I ever heard out of her. "We have both of them. Now we get you safely through this delivery, and we wait for November." Neither my mother nor my sister had the faintest idea what we were holding. They kept right on talking. Junie and Nell Whitaker were born on a Thursday at the end of August at 37 weeks by scheduled cesarean at St. Luke's, where the plan had always been. Junie came first, furious about it, 5 pounds 1 ounce of pure opinion. Nell followed 90 seconds later at 4 pounds 14, calm as a Sunday, and the room laughed out loud because you could already tell whose temperament came from where. When the nurses laid them on my chest, both at once, skin to skin, one tiny ear against each collarbone, Dale put his forehead against mine and cried for the first time in the 11 years I'd known him. Big silent shoulder-shaking tears, his hand covering both their backs at the same time, like a tarp over seedlings. I had spent 11 years working 3 floors underneath that delivery room. I thought I understood what happened up there. I understood nothing. Nobody tells you that their weight is measured in ounces, but their existence lands in tons. For one entire day, I forgot I had a sister. That is the honest truth, and I am not sorry for it. For one day, there was no protective order, no audit log, no oatmeal cardigan, no countdown, just a bag of warm laundry asleep on my chest in duplicate, and a man snoring upright in a vinyl chair with one sock off, and a paper cup of hospital ice chips that tasted, I swear to you, like champagne. Aunt Byrne visited with 2 crocheted hats and didn't stay long and cried in the doorway on her way out. My mother sent flowers to the front desk. I had them redirected to the children's floor without reading the card, and I want you to know it didn't even hurt. That's how full that room was. The world gives you days like that, so you'll have something worth defending. It was about to remind me why the defending mattered. Here's what nobody in my family knew about that delivery. I had spent the whole month of August preparing for it like a mission, because hospitals have security protocols for exactly my situation, and I'm on staff. I know every one of them by name. Our admission was flagged confidential. If you called the switchboard and asked for Colleen Whitaker, the answer was that no such patient existed. The maternity floor runs on a coded door anyway, but our chart carried a security alert with a copy of the protective order attached to it, and the approved visitor list had 3 names on it, Dale, Byrne, and my friend Deb from the pharmacy, smuggling in a milkshake. Friday morning, the day after the girls were born, the unit clerk picked up an outside call. A woman, warm as pie, so sorry to bother you. She was the patient's sister. The family had planned on a delivery at Mercy, and they'd switched at the last minute, and could someone just confirm the room number? She wanted to send balloons. The clerk, bless her trained heart, confirmed nothing, logged the call at 9:41 a.m., and reported it up the chain because of the flag on my chart. Mercy, my canary, singing for the second time on a recorded line to a maternity desk with a timestamp on it. An hour later, hospital security escorted a woman out of the second-floor parking ramp. She'd been standing between cars near the skywalk entrance. No visitor badge. She left without any argument at all when approached, so there was no report beyond a line in the shift log. Description: mid-30s, sunglasses, oversized cardigan. It was 91 degrees that day. I read that line in the security summary Harriet later requested, sitting safe behind a coated door, with a daughter asleep on each arm, and I felt the strangest calm come over me. Every door she tried, I had already locked. For once in my life, being the woman who plans for the worst was paying out in full. The knock came on a Tuesday in late October. The girls were 9 weeks old. I was 3 weeks back at work on day shift, and the woman on my porch held up a laminated badge, Child Protective Services, following up on a report. Every parent's stomach knows that sentence before the brain finishes translating it. Someone had called the state hotline about my daughters. The report, she explained inside, alleged that a hospital worker was leaving newborn twins unattended during overnight shifts, that the infants were failing to thrive and missing medical care, that there were unsecured firearms in the home. Anonymous, of course. I want to tell you what fear tastes like when somebody aims the government at your children, like a penny under your tongue. And then I want to tell you what 8 months of discipline does. I didn't argue. I didn't tremble. I documented. I walked that woman through my house with the folder I keep on the girls. Every pediatric visit since birth. Weight curves climbing like stock charts. Immunization records. The pediatrician's after-hours number written on the inside cover. I showed her the nursery, the locked medication box, the gun safe with Dale's deer rifle in it, and the key on my own key ring. I explained, and then documented with court paperwork, that I had not worked a single overnight shift since the twins were born. Day shift only. My schedule stapled to the refrigerator. She was kind and thorough, and finished in 90 minutes. Unsubstantiated, she said. Case closed. And then she paused at the door with her tablet against her hip. She couldn't reveal the reporter, she said. And then, in the careful voice of a woman staying inside her lane while pointing straight at the lane over, but the report mentioned your overnight shifts, and it described this home's layout. Most anonymous reports don't come with a floor plan. The details in that call belonged to someone who had either been sitting at my family's dinner table or reading my stolen mail. After her car pulled away, I stood in my hallway shaking with a fury I had not permitted myself all year, because this was new territory. The knife had been aimed at me. The post, the lilies, the ambush, the gate latch, me. This was aimed at taking my children. And underneath the fury, cold and quiet, a question with only bad answers. If she couldn't get them on paper, what was she building instead? The first week of November, Harriet and I did the full walkthrough for the hearing, now 9 days out. Her conference table looked like a small, well-organized war. 61 logged incidents across 2 notebooks, 2 police reports, the embroidered bodysuits in their freezer bag, the audit log with its 29 entries cross-referenced in Harriet's tidy hand, the maternity desk call log 9041A, MAM, Mercy, the case closure letter, Aunt Byrne, confirmed and subpoenaed, and Curtis. Curtis had called Harriet himself in September and said he would testify to all of it, the discharge summary, the padding, the outvoting. I owe your daughters that much, he told me on the phone, and his voice cracked on daughters. Into the middle of that week, my mother's letter arrived, 4 pages handwritten, on the good stationery with the cardinals on it. I've read it many times since, always with the same amazement. Because in 4 pages of ink about family and forgiveness and what Daddy would have wanted, there is not one single sentence acknowledging that anything had ever been done to me. It was addressed to a problem, not to a person. Drop this court nonsense, honey. Families don't need judges. Let me host a dinner, the 4 of us, and we'll work it out where it belongs. And then the closer. underlined. The sentence I will hear in her voice until I'm an old woman, we were going to fix this as a family, were past tense, as if the fixing had been scheduled all along, and I had wrecked it by declining to hold still. I did not answer that letter. I added it to the war table, where it became Exhibit L. On the 8th of November, 6 days before the hearing, my phone rang at 4 in the afternoon with a number I didn't know, and a voice I'd never heard said, "Mrs. Whitaker? Detective Raina Alvarez, Cedar Rapids Police. Do you have a minute? It's about a storage unit out on Highway 30. She would say almost nothing else on the phone. A facility called Cedar Lock. A unit whose contents appeared to concern me and my children. Could I come out in the morning and take a look and bring photo ID? And then a pause I have thought about many times since. Maybe don't come alone. Dale's mother took the girls that night. I didn't sleep, and I didn't try. I stood in the doorway of the nursery for a long time listening to the two of them breathe out of sync, Junie snuffling like a small engine, Nell silent and serene, even asleep, the calm one. And I ran the whole 9 months through my hands like rope. The knife in March, the lilies in April, the waiting room, the tears that shut off like a faucet, the cardigan, the latch scraping at 1:40 in the morning, rose-colored thread, 29 logins, a floor plan and a hotline report. Every one of those things I had caught, logged, bagged, and countered, and on paper I was winning. The order, the audit, the hearing. 6 days out, standing in that doorway, none of it felt like winning. It felt like I had spent 9 months documenting the weather of a hurricane from inside the house. And in the morning, a detective was going to open the front door and show me the sky. Around 3 a.m. Dale came and stood behind me without a word, and we watched them sleep the way people watch a fire. You know how babies breathe with their whole torso, ribs and belly and shoulders, all of them in on the project. Finally he said the only thing there was to say. Whatever's in that unit, Colleen, it ends this week. One way or the other, it ends. At 20 to 9 the next morning, we pulled into the gravel lot at Cedar Lock, and Detective Alvarez was waiting by Unit L18 with the door already rolled up. You already know what was in there, because I started this story standing inside it. Now let me tell you the rest of what my eyes found once my knees came back. The cry was assembled, a convertible double, the exact model of a registry I had started online months before and never sent to a single soul. And the mail, a rubber-banded brick of it on the folding table, my bank statement, Aunt Byrne's birthday card, the 20 still tucked inside it, 2 appointment reminders from the clinic. And at the bottom, in a folder like homework, a typewritten draft, 3 pages, addressed to the state's child abuse hotline, alleging neglect by a hospital worker who works overnights, with phrases in it I recognized because I had heard a woman read them off a tablet in my own hallway. That's where the hotline report was written, in a rented room with stars on the wall, at a folding table, next to a nightlight shaped like a moon. Detective Alvarez's people had been called out by the facility manager, a heavy-set man named Gary who kept apologizing to me like any of it was his doing. The after-hours door alarm had flagged the unit twice that week, and on Tuesday night he had found a woman asleep inside it, in the glider, wrapped in a baby blanket. Trespass after hours, welfare check police, and the officers saw the mail, a federal offense sitting right there on the table. They ran the names painted on the wall, and Junie and Nell Whitaker came back attached to an active protective order with my name on it. My own paperwork had led them straight to me. One more thing, Alvarez said, and flipped her notepad. Unit's not rented to Vivian Reyes. Lee says Marguerite Prentice. Behind me, quietly, Dale said a word I won't repeat on this channel. I looked at the stars and the moonlight and my daughter's names, and I said, yes, that's my mother. Alvarez walked me through the paperwork in the manager's office, under a humming fluorescent tube with a space heater ticking in the corner. Lease for Unit 1118. Signed the 28th of March, 2.5 weeks after the baby shower. $62 a month, 8 payments, auto pay, and the card on file belonged to Margaret Prentice. Gary, wretched with apology, remembered the rental day well, an older lady, very put together, said it was for her daughter. A nursery's worth of things. They're going through a hard time and need somewhere to keep it all until things settle. They'd come back together over the summer, more than once, unloading boxes out of a trunk. He remembered them laughing. My mother signed that lease in the same 2 weeks she was calling me about my sister's fragility and my poorly timed announcement. March to November, that entire time. Every Sunday dinner where she passed me the green beans and asked how I was sleeping. The cardinal stationery about fixing this as a family. All of it happened while her name sat on a lease. $62 a month bought the room where my replacement was being furnished. And I have to be precise here, because precision is all I had left. I don't believe my mother thought she was building a kidnapping. I believe she thought she was managing one. The way she'd managed the stomach aches and the funeral and the shower for a baby who is already gone, storage until things settle, as if a delusion were a sofa, as if when it all blew over, the crib could quietly come home to whichever daughter needed it by then. She hadn't lit the fire, she just rented it a room and kept it fed and made absolutely certain that nobody ever called the fire department. While I was signing the property forms, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my mother, sent from a kitchen 15 minutes away, with no idea on earth where I was standing. Sunday dinner? I'm making your favorite. It's been too long, sweetheart. I looked at it for a long moment under that fluorescent hum next to a detective cataloging my stolen mail. Then I thanked Gary, and I thanked the detective, and I walked out across the gravel to the truck, and rode the whole 20 minutes home in silence with my mother's text glowing in my lap and 5 days left before the hearing. I never answered it. There was a courtroom for that now. November 14th came down gray and cold, the way it does here. The courthouse hallway smelled like wet wool and floor wax, and my family had sorted itself onto benches like a wedding nobody wanted. Byrne and Curtis and Dale on one side, my mother's people on the other, Shelby studying her phone, the great-aunts in their Sunday coats. My mother arrived early, of course, in her navy funeral suit, and made straight for me before Harriet could intercept her. She took my hand in both of hers and pressed it and whispered, urgent and warm, like we were conspirators. It's not too late to stop this, sweetheart. Walk in there and tell them it was a misunderstanding. We were going to fix this as a family. 5 days after a detective showed me her name on that lease. She said it to my face again. And I looked at her, really looked, the way you read a chart, and I understood something that has taken me until now to say out loud. She wasn't lying. That was the terrible center of my mother. She believed it, every word, the same way she believed a party could cure a loss, and a storage unit could hold a delusion, and I could be spent like housekeeping money to keep her firstborn's weather calm. I took my hand back, slowly, without heat, the way you take an instrument away from somebody who shouldn't be holding it. And I said nothing at all, and her face changed as if I had shouted. Then the far doors opened, and Vivian came up that hallway with her attorney, and the benches went silent one row after another, like a wave dying on a beach. She was radiant, serene, and under her open coat, unmistakable and deliberate, was the soft, rounded front of a woman in her second trimester. The cardigan. Nobody moved, nobody asked. In a hallway full of people who had toasted her at a shower in March, not one soul met her eyes, and every last one of us was counting. Courtroom 4 was small and warm, with a ceiling fan that ticked once on every rotation, and by the time the bailiff closed the doors it held, by my count, 19 members and friends of my family. Judge Marion Teague presided. A compact woman in her 60s, with the air of somebody who has heard every version of every story and would like the short one, please. Harriet stood and gave it to her, and the short version took 40 minutes, because the short version was 9 months long. She entered the notebook 61 incidents, dated and witnessed, the photographs, footprints under the north window, the lilies, the white box on the porch. The bodysuits came out of the freezer bag, and Harriet held them up by the shoulders, tiny and yellow, the rose thread catching the light, and asked the court to note that they were hand-embroidered, and the ceiling fan ticked into a silence that had weight to it. Then the audit log. 29 accesses by an authorized proxy, matched to incidents. Harriet read them in pairs, deadpan, and devastating. Login, incident, login, incident, login, incident, login, incident. Then the maternity desk log, 9:41 a.m.a. A caller citing mercy. And then Harriet's explanation, brief and surgical, of the canary. A false detail, spoken once to one person at a Sunday dinner. I watched Judge Teague stop writing, look up, first at my mother, then at my sister, and lay her pinned down flat on the bench. Aunt Byrne testified to the knife in plain bus driver declaratives that no cross-examination on earth could dent. She pointed it at the pregnant one. I was 3 feet away. I moved her arm myself. And then it was me. I wore my work shoes for steadiness. I answered Harriet's questions in order, kept every answer short, and did not look at the benches. At the end, she asked me what I wanted the court to understand, and I said the sentence I had practiced in a nursery doorway at 3 a.m, the truest one I had. I'm not here to punish my sister, Your Honor. I'm here because my daughters can't testify for themselves. The fan ticked. Somewhere behind me a great-aunt was crying. I found out later it was one of the 2 who had unfriended me in March. I kept my hands folded and my voice level, and I stepped down. Calm is a language, too. I had been fluent in it all my life. That was the first room that ever heard it. Vivian's attorney opened by calling the whole matter a family misunderstanding tragically inflamed by grief, and for a moment the benches breathed easier. Then Harriet called Curtis Reyes. Watching a decent man dismantle his own life under oath is not something I ever want to see again. He kept his eyes on the rail and his voice at a mumble. The judge twice asked him to raise, and he laid it all out. The emergency room in November, 19 weeks. The discharge summary entered as an exhibit. The plan made in a parking lot at 2 a.m. The shower that went forward in March anyway. The padding under the cardigan, he had found it in the laundry, he said, and been told it was a posture pillow. The 4 earlier losses, over 7 years, hidden one by one. His begging for a doctor, a counselor, anyone, and the answer that came back every single time, from his mother-in-law in her kitchen, calm as scripture. Therapy is for strangers. Family heals family. I should have gone over both their heads, he said finally, down in his own hands. I kept telling myself family knows best. I was outvoted. You can be outvoted right off a cliff. Then Detective Alvarez took the stand and put Unit 11 up on the courtroom screen, and I listened to 19 people inhale at the same time. Crib, the painted stars, the names, the schedule taped inside the drawer, the photographs of my house at night, the brick of mail, the drafted hotline report on the folding table, the lease. March 28th. Marguerite Prentice, $62 a month. Dates, charges pending, Alvarez noted, professionally colorless. Stalking, mail theft, violation of a protective order, additional findings referred. Through all of it, I watched my sister at her table because I could not watch her. She sat perfectly composed, hands folded on the swell under the cardigan, watching the screen show her nursery to the county, and her lips were moving, barely. A whisper with a rhythm to it, the same shape over and over. And from the second row, I finally made it out, and my whole rib cage went cold. 19 weeks, 2 days, 19 weeks, 2 days. Not a defense, a rosary. Somewhere under the performance and the padding and the rose-colored thread, my sister was still standing in a hospital hallway in November, counting. For one breath. God help me. I grieved for her. Then the judge asked whether she wished to testify, and Vivian stood up and smiled. She was good for about 90 seconds, composed, wounded, gracious. The coffee shop performance scaled up for a courtroom, my sister accepting the role of a lifetime. She spoke about grief, about sisters growing apart, about hoping for healing. And then her attorney asked the question he had to ask, the one meant to humanize her. Was she aware that the storage unit's contents referenced her nieces? And Vivian looked at that screen, still frozen on the painted wall, on Junie and Nell in careful looping letters, and something in her face came off its hinges. Reference, she said, quietly at first. That's their room. The attorney tried to move on. She rose up out of her chair instead, and her voice rose with her, and 30 years of practiced fragility burned off in front of the entire county like fog in the sun. They were supposed to be mine. She stole them. She watched me lose mine, and she went and took 2, because she takes everything. Her lawyer's hand on her arm. She threw it off, the bailiff moving, the judge's gavel, the benches frozen solid. And Vivian turned from that screen to me and pointed. No knife this time, just a shaking finger, the same trajectory, my body, my center. And she screamed the sentence she had been rehearsing since a Saturday afternoon in March, with a ribbon blade in her hand. This was my day. It was always supposed to be my day. The gavel again, and again. Order in this court. She was still shouting as the bailiff walked her out to compose herself. About the shower, about the names, about what she was owed, and every word she landed drove another nail into her own case, sworn on the record in front of 19 witnesses who had known her since the day she was born. Her attorney sat down slowly, the way men sit when the building has already come down. I did not move. I did not make a sound. My hands stayed folded in my lap, and I watched my sister be removed from a courtroom, confessing at full volume, and I finally understood the whole shape of it. She had waited her entire life for a room full of family to look at nobody but her. And there at the end she got it, the last stage she will ever be given. And nobody in that audience was clapping, and she couldn't tell the difference. Judge Teague took 20 minutes in chambers and came back with a voice like a closing door. Full order of protection. 1 year, renewable. No contact with me, with Dale, or with the minor children. No third-party contact. And I want counsel to explain to the respondent's family precisely what third party means. 500 feet. Surrender of any keys or codes. The pending criminal matters would proceed separately. Given the testimony, the court strongly encouraged counsel toward a resolution involving mandated psychiatric evaluation, and the court would be making a referral regardless. Then she squared her papers, took off her glasses, and looked at the second row, where my mother sat in her navy suit. And the courtroom held its breath. Mrs. Prentice, you are not a respondent here today, and this court has no order for you. But this record has your name all through it, a proxy account, 29 accesses, and a lease. This family did not arrive here despite your help. It arrived here by way of it. The county attorney will draw their own conclusions. And so, I suspect, will your family. That was all she said. It was everything. In the hallway afterward, the sorting happened all over again, in reverse. A great-aunt stepping back from my mother. Physically, one small step and then another. The way you back away from a stove you've just learned is hot. Shelby crossing the hall to me with her phone hanging forgotten in her hand and tears on her face, saying, "I'm sorry, Collie," over and over. And my mother standing alone by the courtroom doors in her navy suit, straightening her scarf with small, precise tugs, calling out to the retreating backs of her own generation. I was keeping this family together. Nobody answered her. Nobody even slowed down. Byrne put an arm through mine. Dale took the other side, and we walked out through that wet wool smell into the cold. And behind us, her voice bounced off the marble and came back to her alone. On the courthouse steps, the November wind came straight down the street with nothing to slow it, and Dale pulled my collar up with both hands like he was bundling a kid. Across the lot, Curtis sat in his car with the engine off and his forehead on the steering wheel. Byrne squeezed my arm and went to knock on his window, because Byrne is Byrne. I stood there a minute in the gray light with one hand on the cold stone railing and looked back up at those doors, where in the span of one long morning I had been believed, fully, officially, on the record. For the first time in 34 years. 9 months. 61 incidents, 29 logins, 2 notebooks, 1 canary, 1 judge. The knife was never the scary part. I got in the truck and we drove home to our daughters. It's been 7 weeks since that hearing, and I'm recording this from a house you haven't seen in a town I'm not going to name, about 2 hours from Cedar Rapids. We put the little gray house on Sycamore up for sale the Monday after court. Mrs. Ostrander cried and then helped us pack, and then gave the new owners a full briefing on the neighborhood, I'm told. A hospital out here had an opening on their pharmacy floor that fit like it was tailored. We didn't run. We chose. There's a difference, and it took me all year to learn it. Running is when you leave to get away from somebody. Choosing is when you leave to get toward somebody, and the somebodies are asleep down the hall in a nursery we painted ourselves. No stars, no names on the wall. They've got a whole lifetime for people to learn their names the ordinary way. Now, the ledger, because I promised you consequences you could count. Vivian signed a plea agreement in December. The stalking and the violation charges, with the mail count folded in, conditioned on inpatient psychiatric treatment, which her attorney fought for, and I did not oppose, because a locked ward with real doctors in it is the first honest room my sister has been given in 37 years. The evaluation named it. A delusional disorder, woven all the way through complicated grief, 5 losses deep, untreated by design. Her sentence is treatment. Mine, I suppose, is knowing that if one single person had said the word doctor in November instead of the word shower, none of us would ever have learned what a courtroom ceiling fan sounds like. Curtis filed for divorce and moved down to Tulsa near his brother. A card came from him last week. No return address. Inside, just a gas station card with a cardinal on it and one line, tell the girls someday that their Uncle Curtis tried. I will. He gets to be in the story I tell them because he earned it at a diner table, and again under oath. The nursery in Unit 1118 was released from evidence in December. I had every stick of it donated to a women's shelter downtown. Cribs are innocent. It isn't their fault where they get assembled. Except the back wall. Gary painted over that himself, before we ever thought to ask. Gray primer, 2 coats. He wouldn't take money for it either. And my mother writes to me once a month. The Cardinal stationery, my new address, courtesy of somebody I still haven't identified, and honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. I don't read them, and I don't burn them. They go in a shoebox on the top shelf of the coat closet, sealed. Dated in my handwriting. Documented, like everything else. Some doors you don't slam. You just stop standing in front of them. Here's the one thing I know now, that I did not know at that baby shower in March. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's a waiting room, and you will sit in it forever, holding your paperwork, until somebody sicker than you needs your chair. That's my story. 1 cake knife, 29 logins, 2 names painted on a wall that never should have known them. And if this reminded you to check who still has access to your life, your accounts, your records, your medical portal, your spare key, your peace, don't wait until Sunday. Do it tonight. Then share this with a woman you know who keeps the family peace at her own expense.